everyone. Good morning. Thank you for being here for Resilience and Recovery. It's a great way to start a Saturday morning. I'm Hillary. I'm the co-lead of the Summit Programming for BRIC, and I'm very excited to introduce our moderator for this talk, Shari Hawley. So I'm going to hand it over to her, and then all of these speakers, if you could please turn on your cameras, we can go ahead and get started. We are still waiting for one speaker, so she will probably pop on when she gets here. And there will be time for a Q&A at the end, so feel free to put any questions in the Q&A function, and I'll make sure that our speakers hear it. So hand it over to you, Shari.
Thank you so much, Hillary, and welcome everyone to this panel. I'm so honored to be here. I'm really excited for this amazing, very necessary discussion today. But before we get started, like she said before, my name is Shari. I am Director of Operations for Pipelines, which is a mobile app that connects underrepresented talent starting at age 15 directly to job and training opportunities across tech, entertainment, and creative industries, and also companies to a vast pool of qualified, diverse talent. So this is a conversation that I've had many times, and that I will have over and over again, because it's really the only way to make real change. It starts with the dialogue, right? So I'm really happy that we're here today for resilience and recovery. That's what it's about today. So before we dive into the conversation, I would like our panelists to introduce themselves. Like she said before, we are missing two wonderful people, but hopefully they jump on soon. But we'll go with the flow. It's all good. We're here. So let's start with you, Tony. Why don't you take it away?
So sorry.
Thanks, Shari.
Sorry, Carson, are you able to turn on your camera? Hopefully he is. Okay, we'll work on it.
Okay. Thanks, Shari. My name's Tony DeZino. I'm a simple photographer turned visual storyteller, and I live with circus people. By that I mean that my world collides with artists, athletes, and innovators. My sweetheart is a veteran of the Cirque du Soleil of many years, and as such impacts my life and my look out onto the world. In my work, I happen to be a graduate of that art center, so it's sort of a homecoming, which is sweet. And I taught there for more than 12 years. And in that time, been involved in many projects, including co-teaching the photography class on nonprofit, which was based on the United Nations Millennium Development Goals. And that led me to a long-term project in Afghanistan, working on behalf of empowering young women, which in turn led to a project of giving voice in the Black Hills with the Great Sioux Nation and the people's rights to the return of their sacred lands, which influenced my next long-term project, being involved in conservation and preservation of endangered species. And somehow I've been invited to this panel as a privileged white male who, it's like the late great Robin Williams said, listening to Tony talk in a panel with fierce women and people of color is a lot like listening to a plant try to describe the motives of a mammal. So I'm going to listen very well today and take copious notes. So if you hear scribbling in the background, that's me. And with that, I'd like to hand it off to my comrade. Who's going next?
Ruben.
I think it's just me right now. It's just you and I, Tony. So, hi everyone. Good to meet everyone. I think I'm probably the odd one out of this panel. My name is Ruben Kodum. I'm a clinical psychologist based here in Los Angeles. I specialize in helping individuals in recovery for trauma and addiction in particular. I founded Cope Psychological Center, which is in Los Angeles, but we help individuals throughout California. And really our goal is to help people with evidence-based treatments to, find the most effective, creating space for them to share their experience and ultimately helping them build resiliency and recover, as the name of this panel goes. I also work at the West Los Angeles VA, where I manage a 30-bed residential rehab program for vets who are unhoused and who are struggling with addiction. And as part of my role, I'm also on faculty at UCLA. So I have a few different hats. So I'm just really excited to be here. And hear from everyone else. I don't know who's going to talk because I think we all just want to listen to each other maybe. But it's great meeting everyone, and I look forward to the conversation.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I do also want to ask Tony and Ruben, if you could drop links in the chat where you both are so interesting. And I think the work that you're doing is so incredibly important. And I'm sure our attendees will want to learn more. So either now or throughout the conversation, if you guys could just drop some links in the chat for our attendees to learn more about you and learn more about the work that you do and how they can support you and be involved, that would be wonderful. So we're going to go with the flow here. It's all good. We have 40 minutes together, and we have a Q&A at the end, as Hillary stated earlier. So if you guys have questions, there will be an opportunity for that at the end. But I want to talk about the goal of this panel today, because if you look at the title, when you say break, resilience, and recovery, and we think about this last year, how we've had to adapt in ways that we never thought we would, right? So this is what this panel is about. Like when you talk about the beginning, we were so resilient, everything was just kind of changing. We had all these moving parts. And now we're in this new year and we're really innovative. I look at this as a really innovative time in this, cross sector in this industry. And so when we think about students or entry-level talent, how has it affected students? And then what does this mean for people who are trying to break into the industry, who are entry-level, who have little to no experience? And I want to touch on the good and the bad.
Well, the thing I left out is probably the most important thing in my intro, which is what I'm doing now, not just what I'm doing in the past. But, I wanted to give you a snapshot of my background, if only because you can frame, the context of any comments or suggestions I make with that. And you can decide whether to take it with a grain of salt or a 50-pound bag of rock salt. But presently I've landed. Hey, Carson, we see you.
Hi, Carson. Do we want to pause really quick? We just got another panelist to the party. Carson, if you could just introduce yourself, who you are, who you work for, the type of.
Hold on a second. I think I'm on now. Hold on. Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm on now. Good. I was just getting tech help on the side.
No worries.
It was weird because I was on, but I wasn't on. So my name is Carson Smith. First of all, I'm really flattered and honored to be at this table. It's sort of like when you get elevated to the like the big kids table at Thanksgiving, and you don't really kind of know how to act. You're like, okay, cool. I'm not sure how, but anyway. My name is Carson Smith. I head up community efforts at Nickelodeon. Hey, Claire.
Hi.
And I basically what Nick Community Efforts stands for NICE, or NICE stands for Nick Community Efforts. We have twofold. We want to go ahead and first of all demystify the process of content creation for kids. Initially in Los Angeles, but now with COVID and these resources, essentially across the planet. And we want to create career pathways and make these children aware that these career pathways exist. Mm-hmm. So we run a number of programs. We run a mentorship program in Los Angeles with kids in Burbank High School and 6 LAUSD schools. We run a mentorship program with a high school in Canada called Sisler. We run a series of master classes that are on the Nickelodeon Twitch channel that focus on the key phases of the animation process. We have a program called Let's Draw, where we draw with children. Super complicated. Really, 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 really difficult to understand. It's just drawing with kids. And we do that in classrooms and we do that in hospitals. And we're also piloting a version of that in Spanish called Vamos a Dibujar. So Let's Draw will now be seen in Mexico City and other places. And yeah, that's what we do. And we're just trying to get kids into the building who otherwise wouldn't have opportunities to get into the building, whether it's from a physical standpoint of actually getting them into the building or metaphorically long-term having them find ways to find themselves in the building. So that's who I am. I'm also from Los Angeles. I'm an LAUSD kid, public school kid, University of California. So welcome and thank you for having me.
Amazing. Before I kick it over to Claire, I'm just asking the panelists, because everyone on this this discussion does such incredible work, and I want to make sure that the people in attendance have resources to learn more about the programs that you guys are doing. So Carson and Claire, if you could just drop in the chat like a website or links where they can learn more about these amazing initiatives or programs so they can support you and learn more, that would be great. Claire, last but not least.
Hi, sorry for the tech issues I'm having this morning in a variety of ways. Thanks for having me. I'm Claire Curley. I worked for a while with Carson over at Nickelodeon, but in 2019, I had the great fortune of starting the Hello Sunshine Kids in Animation group. And what we are is taking Reese Witherspoon's Hello Sunshine's mission, which is to change the narrative for women through content, to the youngest audience. And that starts with kids. So our demo is 3 to 9 specifically, and we primarily work in the animation space. All of our properties are girl-led, but hopefully the storytelling is such that it brings in all kids, all parents, co-viewing experiences. We have spent the last year building out a slate that we like to call noisy, and building out a team of people who come from DreamWorks and Nickelodeon, PBS, Illumination, etc. To really just bring forward.
Amazing, amazing. You guys came right on time. We hadn't started the discussion yet, so let's just kick it off and dive right in. And I was just saying previously, before Carson and Claire joined us, that this panel is really talking about resilience and recovery for talent, right? And we, as I said before, this last year has been a whirlwind of trying to adapt, and it's just a world of innovation. We're in a really innovative, hyper-innovative space right now. So as we begin to think about COVID and this new normal, as we're calling it, I want to talk a little bit about how this has affected students in both good and bad ways, because it's a good way that it's affected them, but there's also some struggles that we had in the beginning. So can we talk a little bit about how it's affected students, and then what this means for people trying to break into the industry, how it's opened up pathways for them as well? Take it away.
Okay, I'll run with it and stumble and hand off the baton to you guys. But yeah, the part I didn't get to say during my intro is that I'm working with the Emile Cole Atelier here in Los Angeles, which is a satellite of the mothership in Lyon, France, with birthplace of cinema. And as such, I'm helping, in time of politics, pandemic, and polemics, our elevator pitch is that we're launching a new disruptor of higher education and visual arts, and nothing like doing it in the middle of a pandemic. And it's really about how we can address, the barriers to entry into the business in terms of entertainment design and all its facets. And so the family-owned generational tradition in France has really given us carte blanche, as they would say, in terms of addressing this. Because we're small and nimble, we have a core group of 7 administrators, of which I'm just one part. We have just started our new cohort on March 1st, which is an accelerator program directly addressing how we're coming online and distance learning in time of pandemic, to address the fact that the disruption in C19 has, I think that's sort of the center of our conversation today, which is how do we best serve the greatest number of people in this time of barriers, obstacles, and polemics. And what we did is we invited so many of the people who actually brought me in here with Allison and Nicole from Brick, and we started talking about how we could work together. And I'm so thrilled to see Shari, because I know that we've got a lot of work to do together. And it sounds like between Claire, Carson, and Ruben, I've got a new cohort to develop. And the pleasure of this gig is that it's the right thing for the right reasons, and it's moving, like Vernee Myers likes to say, past well-intentioned into well-doing. So I've been really excited about how we've talked to industry titans about, well, what are the 2 most in-demand entry-level positions that you have? And having a focus group and a roundtable and taking this in to develop, we've developed the accelerator program that we have now, which is based on storyboarding and background development, and we just launched that this last week. So my part in it is that I get the plum gig of teaching film and visual literacy and feeding into the rest of the program. But setting the table with that, I wanted to hand off to my esteemed colleagues.
Well, I mean, I'll kick it away in terms of how I approached it this year. It's slightly different and younger, probably, just given my background, than what you were speaking to, which I had so many takeaways there. Thank you so much. Those are really profound. I think that in terms of students and sort of how do we teach resilience and how do we help to impact, especially this year, and bringing it lower. I know this year obviously was completely different, right? So it was the year of remote learning, and it was a year in which kids were having challenges that were unlike any others. First and foremost, I think coming from the Nickelodeon and the kids world, and having gotten the chance and opportunity through the years to work with so many researchers. One of the things that we found for kids, no matter what the age, is just naming it. And naming, the struggle in order to help name the resilience, or name how you pick yourself back up and dust yourself off. And I think that's in remote learning, or that is sort of understanding how to navigate challenges that come our way, both ones that we are in our control, and then ones that come from a different, from a different source that is out of our control. And then being able to teach them how to focus on their needs, from curiosity, and what stems from your curiosity to take you to ask different questions or read different books, to access and figure out different relationships that you might foster that you wouldn't have fostered if you didn't have that specific individual curiosity. And I think, for us as leaders in the world of entertainment and arts, it's really encouraging those conversations at different levels. And I'll just share a personal story for this year in remote learning. One of the things I did with teachers is just to reach out and say, hey, you know what, you're struggling too. And one of the things that I think all of us from the entertainment space and the kids space have are these insights and these tools for engaging students through virtual settings, right? A lot of us here have made our jobs and are living sort of connecting with kids, either through outreach, like Carson's speaking to, or for me, through screens. And so getting to go back and to say to teachers, hey, you know what? I'll never be a teacher. I'll never be able to do what you're able to do. But if you'd like some help connecting with kids through a screen in a different way, I can do that, and I can help you to understand what that means for cadence, or your tone of voice, or even your color of your background, and when you don't want to distract and when you do. And so finding ways to be able to outreach and help students through both our individual sort of skill set, and then also to, as you were saying, build new communities. And I think, exactly that. This group right here, building a new community in a different way to sort of push that forward. Yeah. One big thing I think from this year that we take away is mute. And one thing that I think, sort of goes back to that, speaking to your point of curiosity, or being able to learn to teach kids of all ages to speak up. The hardest part about this year was watching how many schools, how many teachers, how many different environments muted kids so frequently. And so how do you kind of like help them to understand, to self-advocate, hey, muting me all day and listening to you is really hard to then find how to tell you about my curiosity, or what I find interesting about this piece of art history, or this piece of something that you're talking about.
Yeah, could I just add to that just briefly? Claire, thank you for being on this panel. It's kind of a thrill, because the whole idea of building a pipeline for talent means we've got to plant the seeds earlier. So between you and Carson providing that kind of architecture, I'm really stoked about it. But you point out something that really resonates with me, which is about voice. I mean, the literal and figurative part of muting kids is that without any voice, there's no choice, right? No choice equals no power or self-determination. And to me, that's just resonant with all the long-term projects that I've been involved with, which is not that I'm giving voice, but empowering people to have their own voice, whether it's inside of a classroom or in a faraway location. And that's kind of essential, I think, to this conversation, right?
Absolutely. I mean, too, and I love everything that everyone's saying here, and I'm just going to pivot away from the questions. I just feel like my heart is leading me here. But I do want to talk about the barriers for a second, because I think a lot of times when we talk about recovery and access, and we have to understand what the barriers are first. Number one, before we talk about what we can do to truly support our students and our entry-level talent, we need to realistically understand the actual barriers that we're facing. I've been in plenty of conversations where people are completely clueless. It's not their fault, but I do want to talk about that. And I think, Carson, what you're doing is incredible, because, I grew up in Detroit. I didn't have this access. I grew up in Detroit, all Black neighborhood. I wasn't even exposed to entertainment until my late 20s. you know, my late 20s, and that's only because I got a job by luck. And so this is very personal for me, but I think it's very important for people to understand that there are actual barriers in place. I do want to spend some time on that, just in case people are in the audience and maybe they don't know what these kids or entry-level talent are facing to actually break into these industries.
I mean, I can speak to that. I was on a phone call yesterday with one of these schools that we work with. They have a number of campuses, but all of them are in underserved communities. All the kids are at 97, 98% free and reduced lunches, all diverse, you know. One of the primary issues, I mean, before we even talk about any of this and how kids are doing, we have to talk about the digital divide, because that's really the biggest, most pressing issue educationally, period. And it's one that affects kids in the farthest points of the country. It affects kids who look this way and kids who look that way, and parents and people who speak this language and that language. And it's something that's really universal. So I think we need to address that. And that's another conversation for another time, but that everyone needs to be mindful of that. Secondly, I mean, you know, I said this in a call yesterday. We work with a school in South Central Los Angeles, or South LA, according to what generation you're from. And it's a 100-block bus ride up the 110 freeway to Nickelodeon, but it's not a 100-block bus ride. All of us know that. It is a different world. And having grown up in Los Angeles and grown up in the public school systems and going through schools when Prop 13 came through and they stripped away most of our arts funding, you know, we never went anywhere, ever. I mean, I think we went to the opera at the Shrine when I was like 9, and that was the last time. So for me personally, being the gatekeeper of one of the you know the greatest animation studios in the world, it brings me so much joy to bring kids in. I mean, I bring in kids in from my same junior high school. They have an animation program. They found me online and they hit me up, and so there's a certain joy about that. But I mean, I think the barriers are so manifold. I mean, it's technology, it's resources, it's time, it's just knowing that this world, what Claire does, what Tony does, what you do, that this actually exists. I mean, they, you know, their thought is that it's magic. You know, you go to an animation studio and the only people who work there are people who draw, and maybe there's some actors, and they don't realize that there's hundreds of other people who support that. So, you know, that's, I think, to that barrier. There's that. Quick on how the kids are doing. It's a mixed bag. You know, some kids are doing great. Some people actually enjoy this. One of my buddy's kids, she loves this. She hasn't been out of her pajamas or her room in like 4 months, you know? So, but then there's other kids who, and I think Ruben can speak to this, there are other children who are having a really, really difficult time. You know, there's kids in our mentorship programs who are super solid, talented artists, and they just can't get their work done because they don't have access to the technology that they would have at school, or they just don't have that structure and drive. And plus, also, I mean, the world's scary right now, man. Like, this is crazy, right? What we've seen in the last few months. So all of that, that's kind of my take on barriers and how kids are doing.
And if I could, oh, sorry, go ahead, Claire.
Sorry. I was going to say similarly, I think Hello Sunshine, you know, had done the Filmmaker Lab with AT&T sponsoring it. And I love, in terms of what Carson's saying and about Nickelodeon and having been there myself and participating in those events, the companies that are able to look at how do we start where we are right now and start to create ways of taking down those barriers. How do we create access opportunities for people that might not otherwise be able to find those lanes, to partner, to find the money if someone's sponsoring it, to partner, to develop that talent, to find those skills, to create those new entry points. And, you know, I think to your point about barriers, like they need to be fully funded. They need to include pay and housing in some circumstances, certain T&E expenses for their experience of participating if it is more than one day. But starting where you are and looking at how you can make that change and help to break down those barriers, I think is
well, and also if I could add to the conversation, I think, you know, a big part of what's happened, I think, throughout this pandemic is that teachers have become mental health professionals, they've become doctors, they've become a little bit of everything, and people are wearing different hats now. And what it's done, I think, as a result, it's put a magnifying glass on everyone's existing coping skills. And so the coping skills, if you didn't have many before, it's going to be that much harder. And if you were good before, then this is an opportunity to kind of stretch those skills. And it's made it difficult for a lot of people, and there aren't enough resources to be able to access that kind of mental health care with the right kind of training. And, you know, to the point about barriers, you know, part of my research when I was in grad school was actually looking at that, and in particularly around addiction and trauma. And what we'd see is that in neighborhoods that have less access to alternative, healthy reinforcers, you do see more substance use in those communities. And there are less parks and rec funding for parks and rec activities. There's less parks in general. There's less funding for community resources. And so in the absence of like more healthy programs, whether it's the arts, whether it's something sports, or whether it's anything else, in the absence of those kinds of things, the opportunities then become limited. And whether it's substances or whether it's just other unhelpful, ineffective coping skills, people are just looking for a way out at the end of the day. Nobody wants to feel that discomfort. No one wants to be in pain. No one wants to struggle. So people are going to pull on their natural human tendency to find what is most accessible. And if we don't decrease those barriers, we can't help people connect to the programs that are there and the programs that hopefully should be there.
Should I throw the cat amongst the pigeons? Which I love doing. One of my favorite heroes if you saw the morning show that Claire and her wonderful Reese Witherspoon produced, she played a character named Bradley Jackson who blows shit up at every opportunity because she's got to speak truth to power. So I will attempt to invoke her spirit here for a moment in that character and say that clearly one of the things that's dysfunctional about higher ed, where I come from, where I'm a product of, where I was a teacher at Art Center, our host for this summit, whom I'm eternally grateful to for producing me and making me in the excellent tradition that they've held forth, has seriously symptoms of institutional dysfunction, which include tuition that is on par with the Ivy League level, increasing at 8% a year every year, which is about 100% every 4 years, which is unsustainable. That in itself is not to say that wealthy families with generational wealth can't produce talented designers, artists, and so forth. But it all crystallized for me when I was down in Pasadena at Michael's, the art store, buying some supplies for class, and the student age kid in front of me was a young woman, and I noticed her transaction. She filled out a little form that was on the side of the register in hopes of winning a scholarship for being able to enter an art program. And it was a very small moment, and it passed quickly, but it caught my attention because I'm like, that was her chance. To leave it to that small lottery kind of a chance, unfortunately, is precious little. And that goes for all BIPOC. We're talking about, this is underserved, overlooked talent that is rich, that is basically something that is a major drive in what we're doing here in terms of the model that we're creating and the pipeline that we're building and addressing entry and admission and recruiting based on artistic promise, not the ability to pay tuition. So that in itself is one of the things we're doing to address this situation that is clearly connected to giving voice and addressing a far too obvious a problem. I'm only good at stating the obvious, right? And maybe that's useful once in a while. Even a clock that stopped can be right twice a day. So I put these things out there, and I certainly don't mean to be didactic, but if it's useful, please run with it. And if it's not, then just disregard it.
Oh, I love all of this. And too, it really just boils down to Claire's point of, doing the work. It sounds so cliche, right? Like, do the work. Do the work. It's not enough to care. It's not enough to, we need money, we need power, we need investment, we need mentorship, we need champions, we need people to do the work, and it all starts with dialogues like this. So thank you so much for that input. I literally, this is something I could talk about. I could take the whole summit and talk about this one subject, right? But we can't. So I do want to move on to the last two questions before we wrap, and this is the perfect segue to the next question. So now that we've touched on the barriers, I do want to talk about how it's helped students. Because like I said in the beginning, there are some drawbacks to going virtual, but I've seen some miracles. I've seen some innovative, transformative ways that students have plugged into opportunities and resources that they otherwise would not have access to pre-COVID. So, in your respective industries or in your roles, I do want to talk a little bit about how it's helped or assisted or supported students in this new normal.
I can start on that. I mean, we when COVID hit, everything I do is forward facing. So honestly, I was pretty freaked out. Like, how am I going to pay my mortgage? And I was hiking up at Griffith Park one day, and my first response was, well, you have an influencer in your family, and she knows exactly how to do all this stuff. Call her up and ask her. And she's like, well, just do it virtually. So, that happened, and we had a best field trip ever program planned with a school from South LA. And called them up and said, hey, let's do it anyway. And so we hopped on a Zoom call with 125 kids and a CG modeler, and using ZBrush, we knocked out a Patrick Starfish. And then we did that we did another one. And then we were, through Toon Boom Animation, we hooked up with a school in Canada. We did another one there. Then we moved south and we did one in Spanish with Latinx animation and Pixelato called, Grand Excursion. And so started to realize that all of these things we could do, taking aside the digital divide, we were able to reach a lot more kids. So, our master classes that were once held in Burbank High School, we jumped on Twitch, and the first story class we did had, I think, 1,200 kids sign on. So, that was a big deal. And the great thing about young people is that, unlike us, and I'm not saying we're not young, but young people expect things to be messy and dirty. So when that Twitch stream crashed and went down for 15 minutes, all 1,200 of those kids plus a couple extra came back on and joined, because kids understand this world is messy and weird, and that's what's kind of fabulous about them. So that's been happening, and I've been seeing this all over town. Now, one thing is we have to make kids aware, but there's the Brick Foundation here. Kids can hop on here. There's Rise Up Animation, which is another great resource, which we've partnered with. There's all sorts of different nonprofits and organizations. So, for our mentorship program, which was traditionally at Burbank High School, now we have 6 kids from 6 LAUSD schools across the city who are joining in once a month to sit down for an hour and a half with 2 Nickelodeon artists, actually Nickelodeon employees, to sit down and talk about their animated shorts. And we're creating those animated shorts. The same thing with our program up in Canada, where we have, a couple of our Canadian employees, but then a couple of other employees hopping on with 35 kids to create these animated shorts that they're going to show at the Ottawa Film Festival. So I think in that regard, it's been pretty helpful, but you have to know where those resources are, and you have to have those teachers. I work primarily K through 12, so you have to have those teachers who know that those things are out there, but they are. And so I think that's one benefit of all of this. And, I think when we go back to the new normal, whatever that is, all of this is going to be part of that. I mean, we're probably going to do a best field trip ever in Senegal. Like, when we ever think about doing that? And it's not hard to do. It's an hour and a half of your life, So it's, and it's more cost effective, and, we don't have to, get people in places and drive in buses, and, so there's that. Obviously, we all miss that personal feel. There's nothing like seeing your animation hero in person, but until that happens, we can roll with this.
Could I add to that, Carson? I would really appreciate that. And the more that you talk, the more I fall in love with what you're doing in terms of, whenever we're stumbling into a new space, I always remind my emerging artist, young Jedis in class, I say, look, any creative endeavor is a raid on the inarticulate, right? So that's T.S. Eliot, and he's talking about the fact that we're striving for language, and that includes in this space in time of pandemic. Teaching online was pretty new to me last year, and the remarkable thing about it was that I had probably 80% of my students take me aside and confide in a way that they may not have done in person in class for various, body politic reasons. But with the privacy that is afforded on online, I found that we had students who came out, who dealt with their alcoholism, who just wanted to, it's like Ruben's talking about, the coping skills they didn't have, right? That they were failing, and felt safe enough with the rapport we had based on that online relationship as people who are excited about learning the same things, that the whole class blossomed from that. So in terms of adversity, even with all those challenges, we found that it created the opportunity for a massive kind of intimacy that I haven't really seen in 20 years previous of teaching.
Amazing. We do have 5 more minutes before the Q&A, so I do want to give all of our panelists to answer this last question. And this is such a great conversation. I wish we had more time. Can we have a part 2 to this, please? But our last question, I just want to talk a little bit about, what can we learn from this pivot? And just briefly, if we could just go around, what can we learn from this pivot of our ability to be able to go virtual and offer these opportunities to talent and students? And just very brief, we have 5 more minutes before the Q&A. Let's start with you, Claire.
I think that we're hitting upon is if we can overcome that barrier of entry, if we can get the devices in equal hands across that kid demo, that the opportunity to be able to bring the learnings, to bring the resources, certainly when Carson talks about 1,200 kids showing up at one time, there's a real ability to use the opportunity to reach a greater audience and a more global audience in that way.
That's great.
I'll piggyback on that. I think I was just going to piggyback and say, getting the devices out there, but I also think it goes beyond that too, in that there has to be systems to then support them once they have the device. Is there someone also helping with childcare? What is their access to other things in the community? What is their access to the teacher outside of classes? And how can we kind of integrate things a little bit more and provide the systematic support on the things that happen on the back end of the classroom? Because I think what we realize is that it's not just about what they learn in the classroom, but there's so much other mental health and other things happening that impact what comes to the classroom too. And I think the more we could work on that and bring that conversation forward, and integrating, I'm a psychologist, so I'm all about integrating mental health into whatever it is that we're doing. So I hope, and I think that's a big thing for us to work towards.
Mm-hmm. Tony?
I love that you used the word pivot. I've become a writer late in life here, and the fact that you chose that word immediately conjured the image of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu master Rickson Gracie throwing somebody. When somebody bigger, stronger, faster comes at you, and in the case of a pandemic and once in a lifetime kind of changes for us, that energy can be pivoted and thrown with its own momentum. So I think in terms of dealing with students in this reality, there's specific to our conversation about recovery and resilience. It's always, to me, something around, I remember things in threes: awareness, acceptance, and action. And the awareness that, let's define the problem. We have something that's off the hook, a game changer here for us. Acceptance. I understand that I'm not powerful enough to change that myself, even though I think I'm clever. And then the action part of it, which is what I was hearing yesterday in conversations with, was it Chris Coleman and others from DreamWorks, talking about where is the action, right? So everybody could be aware, because you can't avoid it unless you're wearing a red MAGA hat. The acceptance that, yeah, this is it. This is the reality. We must deal. But the action is the follow through, and it's essential. So every person that comes across this, I look at the connection between what they say and what they do. And here's a group on this panel who are doing, as all the great people do, they do more than they say, right? So I'm taking a real inspiration and restoring my faith in humanity by being included in this conversation with these people. And with that, I wanted to give a nod to Dr. Rubin for everything he does, because without the help we need when we need it, no no human being is an island unto themselves. And we are interdependent. That was something that I really want to underline. And we can talk about more. And I just want to leave this as a standing invitation, not just to my peers here, but anybody watching and listening. Shari's right. It's an ongoing conversation which has to be connected to action. Otherwise, it's all talk and no, you know what they say.
Carson, any last words?
Let me get my mic off. I'm trying to get my mic to turn off. Hold on. One second. There we go. You guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. You know, I'm hopeful. Hold on. It's something now that I got to say something, man. I'm hopeful. We are ascendant. You know, we have learned. We've been knocked into a corner. You know, talking about Muhammad Ali earlier. We've been knocked into a corner. We've been battered, and we've gotten up, and we've done it. And you know, and there are some of us that are suffering. You know, and hopefully, the light that has been shed on the equity issues in this country as a result of what's transpired will push policy, will push change. At least at the bare minimum, will make people aware. But you know, we've done amazing things, man, in a year, and it's been a year since we've all gone home, at least for myself. And we've done amazing things, and we've learned how to work, and we've learned how to interact. And so I think we have to pat ourselves on the back. And you know, I talk to all these people who are like, yeah, man, like, you know, during this time I was gonna like teach myself Japanese or gonna like build a huge succulent garden. And I'm like, hey man, you're upright. You survived. You're doing okay, you know? I mean, this is a tough time. So one, we have to cut ourselves a break, but two, we have to realize what incredible things we have done, and then have that go ahead and temper what we do going forward, because we're going to change how we work, and we're going to change how we interact. And every one of these situations historically, if you look, you know, across the span of time, we have excelled, and we've done this. So let's just keep doing that. And I don't want to sound, you know, too what's the word? You know, not too hopeful, because that's not it. But you know, I don't sound like this isn't, you know, a crazy one. What's that?
Evangelical.
Yeah, well, you know, but yeah, no, I think we can. You know, I am hopeful.
I love it. I love all of this so much. And before I kick it over to Hillary for the Q&A, I'll just say I do want to add my 2 cents to this too. I also want us to redefine what mentorship is, because we don't talk about mentorship enough. And I'm a product of an incredible mentor who literally jump-started my career and gave me an opportunity that I otherwise would not have gotten. And so anyone and everyone can be a mentor. And I just want to challenge people to think outside of the box when they think about what it means to mentor. Because I've heard people say, I don't have time. You do have time. What you have to say does matter. Your story is important, and you have the ability to inspire someone just from telling your story. And so no matter what your title or role or how much money you make, you can be a mentor, and it can literally change lives. And so I am an ambassador for mentorship, and I just challenge you, if you have the ability to mentor someone, do it, because it really it doesn't cost anything, and it could truly change someone's life. So I just want to throw that in there. And so with that being said, thank you so much, Carson, Claire, Tony, Ruben. This is an incredible panel. I'm so honored to be a part of it and moderate the discussion, and I will kick it over to Hillary.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Amazing conversation. I really appreciate all the work you're all doing. We only have a couple minutes left. Sorry, and we do actually have a hard out at 11:20 in this room. So in the interest of practice and action, which I think, as a lot of you said, is we're not just going to talk about it anymore. We're going to put things into action. I'd ask a question actually to Dr. Kodum. What are tools that all of us can practice when it comes to recovery and resilience, whether we're a parent, teacher, whatever it is, to help us in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a few things. I'm a firm believer, and I think Iana Van Zant once said this, of feel, deal, heal. We have to first, and part of our recovery, we have to acknowledge what we've been through. We can't fix that which we don't know is there. And so once we know what we're actually recovering and trying to build resiliency from, then that's the question of what do we do? And I think what this pandemic has shown is how fragile our sense of certainty is and how fragile our sense of control is. And I think we have to foster that sense of agency within ourselves in small ways throughout our day. And whether that comes with having a morning ritual, an evening ritual, a meditation practice, something that you do that is your sense of, for yourself, a sense of control, a sense of joy, a sense of maybe just a sense of certainty that it gives you, you know what, I know every day I can do this. But what I also think, and it could also be, you know, maybe journaling at the end of the night. It could be a whole bunch of things. Exercise, various things, but we have to create spaces for ourselves throughout the day that are unique and different and for ourselves. We don't have to be a hero. We don't have to, you know, we don't need to save the world. We're just trying to get by one day at a time. And I think we can't help people ourselves first. And if we don't kind of work on ourselves, do our own work. So I think part of that is, you know, we got to do our own change. We got to be our own change. And we have to accept the fact this is the reality. What we resist persists. And if we can accept that this is the reality, how do I want to move forward with that? And doing that in really small, palpable ways, I think is the way to go.
Yeah, can I add to that? Dr. Rubin nails it, of course, because it's about self-love and self-respect. And you know, a friend of mine I co-wrote a book with recently on PTSD had to interrupt our project because her father was dying of ALS, and he chose assisted suicide, and the family was gathered, and it's a beautiful moment. And of all the things he could say to all the people surrounding him, he said, before he took his last cocktail, he said, please be kinder to yourselves, because in that, what I hear Rubin describing is, otherwise it's unsustainable. You know, was it David Copperfield said, whether or not I turn out to be the hero of my own life remains to be seen. So this idea of superhero-ness and the white knights and all those kind of savior syndromes, it's unsustainable. You know, I totally underline and agree. And if I could say quickly to pile on to Shari's point about mentors, I wouldn't be here without my greatest teachers, who invested in me long before there was any kind of body of work to indicate my future potential. And that kindness, that generosity of spirit, is why I teach. So all the teachers that I relate to best have that kind of return. And what I'll leave you with is that when I was working with the Lakota, we'd drive everything through prayer and ritual, and the medicine man would speak in Lakota first, and he'd bother to, you know, he actually took the time to translate for the Wachichu white folks, and he'd say, you know, everyone's aware of the 5 senses, and the 6th, the women's sense, intuition. He goes, but almost no one speaks of the 7th. And I went, 7th sense, oh, what's this? And he spoke plainly about the return. Because in an oral tradition, you must pass the story forward. And as a storyteller himself, I connected that to teaching. So I wanted to share that for what it's worth.
Thank you. I think we have time for one last question, unless Shari, you had, were you going to say something?
No, I'm overwhelmed right now. I'm just so happy to be here. I just love this conversation. Like, it's such an incredible group, and I just really hope that the attendees got as much out of it as I did moderating. So, thank you.
One final question. There's a question in the Q&A about virtual programming at a lower price point for art schools, or, you know, resources maybe more generally. Do you see the ways that students in art schools differently now?
Yeah, I think Carson had it with the VR approach, where it's universally accessible. Certainly with the Oculus Quest 2, I've had my mind blown. My kid brought that to me and changed my life in terms of ZBrush, and I can only see how this could be instilled, not only from Glenn Keane's example of painting in space 3D, but the fact that it's accessible. And then here's a radical idea: provide that all online without any cost. So the access is completely open. And then those who commit and have that determination and are motivated and inextricably drawn to it because they must do it, can find those mentors, those Jedi masters to their apprentice. And that's not unlike what we're trying to model here at the Emile Cole Atelier.
I was also going to echo the mentoring idea, right? So each of us having a skill set, and sometimes it might be helping people to be able to communicate their idea or their vision. And other times it might be the technical skill of actually being able to make that vision come to life. But if we can each imagine ourselves as a mentor and be able to help someone else to learn their next step, I think we would see a great impact.
It should never stop with us, ever, never.
Also use those online resources. You know, use sites like Intercity Arts and Crayon Collection and PS Arts and all those various, you know, arts advocacy nonprofits that have things online that children can do that are really, really a very easy entry point. And then start from there. Also check out Bobby Chu. Check out what he's doing, man. That guy, the fact that he built Magma and it works with the Google Chrome is phenomenal, because every kid at the LAUSD was given a Google Chrome on May 12th. They gave out like 75 million of them, right? And he figured it out. Okay, boom, this works with that. So that's a free program. So, you know, it's doing the research, it's finding out where you can find those programs. And then also at the end of the day, just make art. Seriously.
I love that. I think that's a great way to end. Make art.
Yes.
Well, thank you all again so much. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Shari, for moderating. We really appreciate it. And hopefully everyone in attendance was able to glean some nuggets of resilience and recovery that you can put into your own lives. So thank you all so much. And we'll have a little break before the next panel.
Thank you all. Good seeing you.
Yeah.
Take care, everybody.